pardon me. It has been a bit of a sporting few weeks. Happy 4th of July to everyone, whoever listens to this. Before we were speaking about the three types of tyranny, or the three types of freedom, which were the rights without responsibility is tyranny, slavery without rights but responsibility, and freedom is rights with responsibility. It seems that there are those in power, or those maybe, who really don't want the people to understand this. Voting rights and why voting rights is so very important. Right now, there is a push from the authoritarian leaning type persons to remove voting rights and remove not just for quote African Americans, which is the usual, and quite frankly for most European Americans, it's not affecting me, at least so they think. And the reality is that's actually the exact opposite of what's going on. Because without voting, it's the removing voting rights from local control. But before we get into that, I want to go back into some things with the infrastructure plan and its four buckets. As it was stated, we have elder infrastructure. We take care of our elders. Human infrastructure, which is retooling the human workforce, R&D, entrepreneur, and manufacturer development, and then transportation infrastructure. That's what you hear that people talking about hard infrastructure, when in reality, all four of these pieces make us wealthier. It gives us a greater wellspring of information and knowledge to grow from. But one of those I did do. I wasn't in this one. But I was thinking for, yeah, mech suits for the military. And why did I say mech suits? It's one of those odd one. One of the things we have solid state batteries, hydrogen fuel cells to power it, but we also have ARM chips and things that really don't really need much powering to get this going. So let's look at it where we're at right now. So when we think of it, we think of these gigantic metallic hulking things we see in in comics and things. But where can we be right now within the world? Whoops. So when I first started off, this was the Future Warrior program that was quit. It was canceled. But the idea, especially when it first came out, the ideas make a lot of sense. But so let's take what we have with the main things. Right now, they have the a field shirt has been issued that's ballistic proof. That probably came out a bit out of this. But look at the main parts of this. It was the exoskeleton suit and the helmet. The two main things I'm going to talk about right now. The exoskeleton suit was mostly about augmenting the wearer. The thing is, what we have today with 3D printing and alike, we can create that exoskeleton without using energy or very low energy inputs. Because what it got away from was more about augmenting the soldier as opposed to just helping the soldier walk with a 150-pound ruck or a 100-pound ruck. So by transferring the weight into the ground, then working upwards from there. Because the focus was in the wrong spot, and also the technologies had not caught up. We didn't have 3D printing, because what we can do now with 3D printing is we can create a 3D printed web or exosuit that is human powered, depending on the different types of materials. So it can be designed to send the energy, the gravitational energy of the ruck down into the ground around the wearer. This is seen with Ford. They have an exoskeleton suit or a slight. Mostly, it's just for reaching up and and doing work underneath the vehicle on the assembly line, but it's all mechanical. It's not electromechanical. But the way I'm envisioning it as a lattice work around it, where that electrical due to piezoelectrical effect can be used to later on upgrade. But we start with what is the first augmentation of the soldier is just to get him to be able to go with the same weight to be able to march 2 miles as opposed to 1 mile with the same carrying capacity. So and then so we can go and so from one of the things I was looking at is because I was a snowboarder skier and you see these this is something very 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 simple but thinking closer to what the soldier or sailor needs within to achieve their objective and simple like this as it's just very mechanical but it augments but you can it's at the very beginning of something that could be used with electronics to later increase that augmentation enhancement. But this is right off the shelf, could be handed out to every soldier. It helps them reduces the increases the length before between fatigue. And looking now at prosthetics and what can prosthetics do and where have we gone into the world of prosthetics, it is also how we work within these mech suits as we look at, instead of just okay we start with how do we help the soldier run farther. Well, we saw that with a very easy mechanical device. Then we say okay how can we keep the weight off the soldier and off the ruck that goes down that's only there that's a full body structure to help weight go down to the ground. So now the soldier is augmented, but it's only augmented for their own self. Now, once we have that, then how do we now add electronics to that augmentation to where we're using technologies we're learning from prosthetics for more lifelike and also faster processing power to fire off and on this exoskeleton which could use different materials using material sciences to augment the actual movement of the wearer. From there you build up to uh, to the strength of these movements to if it or to electronic or electrical powered systems, but you're still using the artificial intelligence and all the other type of electronics that you gained from the other research as far as balancing, but now it's not so much dependent because the idea is to say you lost all power would the soldier still be able to use their suit as a body armor system and would it be just too heavy for them to lift under the lighter circumstances the goal is to make sure that they can still move if electronics failed. And so by having a say a carbon fiber lattice work or that's underneath with different types of at the joint points different types of either piezoelectrical or other materials that shrink and move that can be fired very rapidly to move those external joints. And then on top of that would be armoring, and then depending on the strength of the mech suit, armoring or other types of firepower. Now, this all seems very fanciful and way out there, but the idea is to be what is the most simplest thing to get to the most complex thing, and what can be put into the battlefield within this week. That's the first place of starting. And so we now know there is, because further on, the idea is the mech suits is you have a body glove kind of type suit on. It actually connects directly. The idea is like the person in the mech suit would be the actual bones of the suit, and then on top of the suit is the armor and everything else, and then the technology using these different patterns, and even using Neuralink possibly one day gives the driver control over the suit, but it's basically designed that it could be done without actually even without those technologies. And then, of course, right now this jetpack aviation. This is more silliness, but the idea, say for instance, you do a halo jump. I even think this might even be useful, but you do a halo jump, and so you would have the jets, and you can jump farther out from the initial target. So it extends the ability to do a halo. But right now it's just a little bit too much. If it's but the, with 3D printing and everything, those jet engines can probably be shrunk down to extremely small with still the ability to have an exceptional amount of lift-off thrust, or even if it's not lift-off thrust, simple thrust for extended halo halo jump. There is this one that's probably, well, just mostly that's sat on my mind, is the with VP Harris at present. Whatever's going on here, it is one of the great tests of the vice president that she may or may not realize it's a test of humility. This it's I the only the person that has ever been in the office of the presidency can understand just how much responsibility is on their fingertips, and the constant bombardment that the vice president will the president just seems like he's trying to prepare the vice president just for the just in case scenario. And one of the greatest things about the awesome power of and responsibility of America is all parts of it. It's it's a rural state. There's a lot of ruralness to it. There's a lot of ruralness to its heart and its soul. Don't tread on me. It's part of who we are, and it's part of what makes us great. But whatever is going on, the president is showing a way of mentoring the vice president to understand it would seem so. I wouldn't say that he's doing it. I'm not. I don't. I know I can never speak for the president. He's obviously brilliant enough to be the president of the United States, and but I just feel there is a yeah, humility, a strength of humility that we as Americans expect of our leaders. We have given them awesome powers, and the last guy kind of forgot about. Well, he didn't have that humility personally, and he's whipped up in anger and hatred. That yeah, it's kind of sad actually. And this is a good test of the vice president. Is she more worried about being the next president, or more worried about the country in general? I can all say we take care of the latter, and the former will take care of itself. So, anyways, this is where we're at right now as far as the battle, because we can't have all these pretty things if we don't have leverage to have these pretty things. They remove our freedom. We cannot. We have to get voting rights through. Or if we fail, then you have to crawl through all the voter suppression in 2022 and vote, because if it's not, there's a lot of evidence suggesting we're being pulled farther and farther right, farther and farther into a pain of fear, which is so un-American. We're Americans, man. We kick ass. It's what we do. We get up in the morning, we kick ass, we work, blah blah blah. We make things happen. That's just the way it goes. That's the way it's supposed to be, and that's who we are. But when you take away our voting rights, you take away our ability to be just like, hey, dude, and to kick ass, because now there's no outlet for any negativity. If there's always one of the greatest things about having voting rights is if you is that redress, the ability to redress your grievances, and with the voting rights right now, right, the senators are trying to do a rope a dope or try to do a bait and switch and go, okay, we'll get a little bit of infrastructure that way we can spend for our cronies, but we're not going to give you R&D work infrastructure. We're not going to do human infrastructure, and we're not going to take care of our elders. That's silly. One of the things about the mech suits I like is because it does actually take care of your elders, because these suits are for between a Neuralink for cognitive abilities to the exoskeleton suit for when elders get older. These are two crossed, just the ideas necessary goes from transportation, military, R&D to elders to the education necessary to I'm saying too often, go figure, and the human infrastructure. All of these pieces are touched by developing something that seems absolutely silly, but it also gives us an advantage. One of the things that was on that Future Warrior that I didn't mention is the helmet. All those technologies for heads up display, arm chips, for so you can run a heads up display inside the helmet. You have a 3G or a 5G connection. I probably would say a 4 or 5G connection, or or an onion style type routing between squad members within the helmet. You have the bandwidth that gives the bandwidth for the commander within a platoon to be able to see through the helmets of 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 his people. There, all those technologies are there available. The camera systems are there available. We could 3D print the helmets, the electronics, batteries are there. We don't, and these are something that can be done very small now, and then as we build up our other systems, then we can move it into much larger, what we saw as kid mech units with, 4 different jet engines and all that other stuff. But what can be done today is actually very, very feasible and very doable. So that's one thing be thinking about. But as always, my always thinking is, what's the if you are in a country with freedom, then what are we? What are what's the only thing worth fighting for is freedom. To be able to say, hey, I want to live my life as I choose it. I understand that there's all these other things, but for the most part, I just want to be left alone, go live my life. You live your life. That's as American as apple pie. And right now, it's being stolen from everybody because because here's one of the things that one of the arguments I wrote down is like, well, corporations are people, and money is speech. Okay, well, if it's one person per vote, then I should know who am I speaking with, if they're paying for the donor to a politician, and a corporation should only have one vote. When they're doing these things where they're getting rid of our voting rights, these corporations and these very large donors are saying they have more votes and they're loud and their money is louder than anybody else's speech. So we need to know who's speaking and who we're speaking with, and that's what the For the People Act does. We have until August because then gerrymandering begins. I and once gerrymandering begins, then you will be ruled by the few over the many. And that's just not right because that means we're not having to communicate, and then they just keep whipping up this anger and fear. Anyways, so this was a bit much, but there was a lot of cool stuff in it. I hope everyone had a great 4th of July, and let's see what craziness happens this week. It's been an interesting one. May the force be with you. And just so you remember, we have to do all this so we get what we want.